I've scored perfect 800s on back-to-back SAT math sections, and in this video, I show you 54 practical tips, tricks, and strategies I've curated for the digital SAT math section, each demonstrated on an actual question from Digital SAT Practice Test 2. For more digital SAT prep content, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Here's how to answer this SAT math question in under 30 seconds. The question states the line graph shows the percent of cars for sale at a used car lot on a given day by model year. For what model year is the percent of cars for sale the smallest? Well, we see on our y-axis we have the percent of cars for sale, and we just have to find where that's the smallest. We see that that's in the year 2014, so our answer is going to be answer choice C. Here's how to answer this probability question on the SAT. Question 2 states for a particular machine that produces beads, 29 out of every 100 beads it produces have a defect. A bead produced by the machine will be selected at random. What is the probability of selecting a bead that has a defect? In this case, we are looking for those that have a defect, which we know is 29 out of every 100. So we know that our probability of that must be answer choice C, 29 out of 100. Here's how to answer this question about intersecting lines on the SAT. Question 3 states, in the figure, line M is parallel to line N and line T intersects both lines. What is the value of X? Well, since M and N are parallel, line T is intersecting them, we know that X is going to be the same as the angle X I just drew next to that angle 33. Now, we also know that a semicircle has 180 degrees in it, so all we have to do is 180 degrees minus 33 degrees, and that will give us our answer of 147 degrees as the angle X. So our answer is D. Here's how to find the y-intercept of this graph on the SAT. The question states, what is the y-intercept of the graph shown? All you got to do is find where we're crossing that y-axis where x is 0, and we see that that is at 8, so our answer there is going to be 0, 8. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. The question states the total cost f of x in dollars to lease a car for 36 months from a particular car dealership is given by f of x equals 36x plus 1,000, where x is the monthly payment in dollars. What is the total cost to lease a car when the monthly payment is 400? We know the monthly payments are represented by x, so we can go ahead and substitute 400 in for x, and we will have 36 times 400 plus 1,000, and that will end up giving us our answer of $15,400, which is answer choice C. Here's how to solve this question about perimeters on the SAT. Question 6 states each side of a square has a length of 45. What is the perimeter of a square? Well, we know a square's sides are all the same, so the perimeter will just be 4 times the side length, which we know is 45. We can go ahead and put 4 times 45 in our calculator, or you can just do it in your head, and you're going to get 180 for your answer as the perimeter of the square. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with factoring. Question 7 states, what is the positive solution to the given equation? In order to solve this, we need to ultimately get it set equal to 0. So let's go ahead and do that by multiplying both sides by x plus 6. Once we do that, we have x times x plus 6. We'll also go ahead and subtract 55 from each side so we can set it equal to 0. And now we have our equation. So let's go ahead and distribute this x to this other x to get x squared and then also plus 6x. So now we have x squared plus 6x minus 55 is equal to 0. Now let's go ahead and factor. So I'm looking for factors of negative 55 that will sum to have positive 6. So when I do that, I can think we've got 11 and 5. I need to keep it positive, so I'm going to have x plus 11, and I would have to have x minus 5. Now we factor, we have to keep in mind that we can't just pick either one. We need to have the positive solution to the given equation. So we know that x plus 11 will ultimately mean that x could equal negative 11, but we can't choose that because that's negative. We need to have x equals 5, so our answer there would be 5. Here's how to translate this word problem into an equation and solve it on the SAT. Question 8 states an object travels at a constant speed of 12 centimeters per second. At this speed, what is the time in seconds that it will take for the object to travel 108 centimeters? Well, this is pretty easy. The distance that you're traveling is 108 centimeters. You want to know how long it's going to take you? You are traveling at 12 centimeters per second. Okay, you're multiplying by your time in seconds. Okay, we'll have t represented as time. In order to solve for t then, all you got to do is divide 108 by 12 to get your answer. When you do that, you're going to end up with your answer of 9, which is answer choice A. Here's how to solve this question about comparing the mean of two data sets on the SAT. Question 9 states the list gives the values in data sets X and Y. Which statement correctly compares the mean of data set X with the mean of data set Y? Well, let's go ahead and find the means of both. We'll start with data set X. So the mean is going to be the sum of these numbers divided by 4. So 5 plus 9 plus 9 plus 13. Now I see I have these same numbers in data set Y. Now I also have a 27 added on to data set Y. Now, since we've got these same 4 numbers in data set X as in Y, and then we are just adding in 27, we know 27 has to be greater than whatever the mean is in data set X because the maximum value in data set X is 13 and 27 is higher than that. So it's going to have to bring that mean up. Therefore, we know that data set Y has to have a larger mean than data set X without even having to calculate the means just by looking at this. So we know our answer there has to be B. If you want to calculate the means for this, you can, but you could also just recognize that 27 is larger than the maximum data set X. Other than that, they're the same. Therefore, data set Y has to be a larger mean. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 60 seconds. Question 10 states a rocket contained 467,000 kilograms of propellant before launch. Exactly 21 seconds after launch, 362,105 kilograms of the propellant remained. On average, approximately how much propellant in kilograms did the rocket burn each second after launch? Well, our starting amount of propellant is 467,000. We then have to subtract how much propellant remained, and then we have to divide all of that by the amount of seconds that this took place, which is 21 seconds. Once we put that into our calculator, we're going to end up with answer choice A, and that'll give us exactly or approximately how much propellant in kilograms the rocket burned each second after launch. Here's how to use ratios to move faster on the SAT math section. Question 11 states if 4x plus 2 equals 12, what is the value of 16x plus 8? Whenever I see a question like this, I'm always looking for proportions. I see 4x plus 2. If I multiply that by 4, I get 16x plus 8. So all I got to do is multiply 12 by 4. 12 times 4 is going to equal 48. So my answer is 48. My answer there is B. This way I don't have to solve for x, so I get it done faster. Here's how to interpret a common situation on the SAT math section. Question 12 states an object is kicked from a platform. The equation h equals negative 4.9t squared plus 7t plus 9 represents the situation where h is the height of the object above the ground in meters t seconds after it is kicked. Which number represents the height in meters from which the object was kicked? Okay, a question on the SAT deals with something falling from some certain height, whether it's thrown off, kicked off, launched off, things like that. And the way that it's usually represented is in an equation like this. In this case, we're asked which number represents the height from which the object was kicked. Well, the height at which it is kicked is when time is at 0, right? It's only kicked once the time is 0. So that means t would be 0, which makes this 0, which makes that 0, which means that 9 is the height when it is first kicked. So our answer there has to be D. Here's the type of question where you should use Desmos on the digital SAT. Question 13 states that f of x is equal to 4x squared minus 50x plus 126. The given equation defines the function f for what value of x does f of x reach its minimum. If I saw a question on like this on the new digital SAT, I would use Desmos for it 100%. I would just check where the minimum is. So I'll go ahead and show you how you would do that. All you got to do, pull up Desmos. You can do this on the digital SAT. It's built into the College Board's Blue Book. So you'd put in the equation, you'd look for where the minimum is. The minimum's at 6.25 for the x value of the minimum. So your answer there would be 6.25. So this is a great example of the type of question where it really does make sense to use Desmos on the new digital SAT. Here's how to set up and solve the system of inequalities question on the SAT. Question 14 states a small business owner budgets $2,200 to purchase candles. The owner must purchase a minimum of 200 candles to maintain the discounted pricing. If the owner pays $4.90 per candle to purchase small candles and $11.60 per candle to purchase large candles, okay, I'm using S for small candles, I'll use L for large candles. What is the maximum number of large candles the owner can purchase to stay within the budget and maintain the discounted pricing? So we only have 2 candle sizes, so we can go ahead and determine the total number of our candles will be L plus S. I want to quickly point something out. You saw as I read through this, I was writing out the system of inequalities as I go. If you encounter a question on the SAT math section that is 3 lines or longer, it is most likely going to end up being a question that involves either system of inequalities, 2 equations that you need to set up, possibly something to do with converting units or something along those lines. But either way, my general recommendation is if a question is 3 lines or longer on the SAT math section, you try to write down units, variables, and obviously like the coefficients in front of certain units, any sort of constants, things like that. Basically, you want to start writing your equation as you read through the word problem, because otherwise, if I hadn't written down these 2 inequalities, I would have to go back and do a second read through. So this is a strategy that I use and that I recommend you use to save time. That being said, let's go ahead and solve for the number of large candles. One thing I want to point out here is you'll notice I'm solving for L right away, not S. That's because I don't give about S. I don't care about S at all, right? We don't need S, we just need L. So that's all we're going to focus on solving. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract, we're going to subtract L from each side because we want to isolate S. And the reason why is we want to substitute in for S something with L. Okay, so let's go ahead and get S by subtracting L from both sides. We get 200 minus L is going to be less than or equal to S. Now we can go ahead and substitute in. Okay, so let's go ahead and substitute that in for S. Okay, so we got 4.9 times S, which we know we can represent as 200 minus L. Okay, and keep in mind that we still have a plus 11.6 L right here. So let's go ahead and distribute the 4.9 to the negative L into the 200. 4.9 times 200 is going to give us 980. Okay, so equals 980. And then we're going to have minus 4.9 L and plus 11.6 L, which will give us plus 6.7 L in total. Okay, because 11.6 L minus 4.9 L gives us that plus 6.7 L. Now that all is still going to be 2200 over there. We'll subtract 980 from both sides, minus 980. That's going to end up leaving us with 1220. 20 is going to be greater than or equal to 6.7 L. Okay, from there, we would divide both sides by 6.7. So we'll go ahead and do that. Divide both sides by 6.7. Okay, 1220 divided by 6.7. I'll go ahead and put that in my calculator. That's going to be 182.09. Okay, 182 point, I'll just call it 0.1. Okay, it's 0.09. All right, now we have to see that L has to be less than or equal to that. Okay, so in order to be less than 182.1, we would go to 182. We can't have 0.1 of something. Okay, so our answer there, in this case, we can't because we have 0.1 of a candle, right? So our answer there would be 182. So we can go ahead and write that down and we'll circle that. So 182, there's our answer. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 30 seconds. Question 15 states in the linear function f of 0 is equal to 8 and f of 1 is equal to 12. Which equation defines f? Immediately I see I have that f of 0 is equal to 8, which means that my y-intercept is 8. I see all of these are in slope-intercept form, and I see the intercept of c and b is not 8, so I can get rid of them. Next thing I see as the difference between a and d is the slope. If I look at my slope, I'm going over 1 and I'm going up by 4, so my slope is 4, so my answer there has to be answer choice D. Here's how to interpret this SAT math problem. Question 16 states that the function f of w is equal to 6w squared gives the area of a rectangle in square feet. If its width is w feet and its length is 6 times its width, which of the following is the best interpretation of f of 14 is equal to 1,176? All right, well, ultimately this function is giving us our area. We know that w represents our width. So f of 14 means that our width is 14 feet. And then that 1,176 means that when our width is 14 feet, our area of our rectangle is 1,176 feet. That's answer choice A, so A is our correct answer there. Here's how to answer this SAT math problem about arc lengths by using ratios and proportions. Question 17 states that the circle shown has center O, circumference 144 pi, and diameters PR and QS. The length of arc PS is twice the length of arc PQ. So we'll call arc PQ X. And the length of arc PS we know is twice that, so we'll call that 2x. I'll go ahead and mark those lengths here. Okay, the next thing we are asked is what is the length of arc QR? Well, arc QR is going to be the same length as arc PS. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on solving for PS just because it's easier for me to show on this video. So if we go ahead and draw this, we see that it's x plus 2x, so that's going to be 3x. We also know our circumference is 144 pi. If our circumference is 144 pi, our circumference is that whole line around the circle, right? It's all of this, that line right there. Okay, so if our circumference is 144 pi, then that semicircle, right, that semi-arc is going to be 72 pi. Okay, so then we know that 72 pi is equal to 3x, right? Because it's the sum of that 2x and that x. Therefore, you would know that PS, which is the same as QR, okay, is 2/3 of that. Okay, so it'd just be 72 pi, times 2/3. Okay, and when we put that in your calculator, or you can just do it in your head, you're going to end up with 48 pi as the value for Q to R. You could have also done it by doing that 72 pi is equal to 3x, okay, and then solving for x and then taking it in and multiplying it by 2. But easier way is just to recognize that, hey, this is a ratio, right? It's 2/3. 2/3 times 72 pi gets you 48 pi. It's a lot easier than going through and solving for x. So I wanted to put the x down there just so you guys could see and understand sort of how it breaks down. But ultimately, it's a lot better if you can just recognize, hey, this is a ratio. We've got half of this whole circumference is 72 pi. We are taking 2/3 of that to get arc of QR. So answer there is B. Here's a couple tips for the SAT math section to help you be more efficient. I'm going to illustrate them with question 18. Question 18 states a company that provides whale watching tours takes groups of 21 people at a time. The company's revenue is $80 per adult. So I'm going to represent that as 80A, and $60 per child, which I'll represent as 60 times C. If the company's revenue for one group consisting of adults and children was $1,440, okay, so that's going to be the sum of these, the value of the number of adults times the cost per adult plus the number of kids times cost per kid. How many people in the group were children? Well, we know that it consists of adults and children, so we can represent that as A plus C. As you can see, I did one read through and I have both my equations, so that's tip number 1 here. As you read through an SAT math problem that is 3 or more lines, as you can see in this case, it was 6. That's why I knew that I wanted to use this sort of tip or trick. Anytime you've got an SAT math problem longer than 3 lines, try to write out the equation or the system of equations as you read through. That way you save time by not having to do a reread through, right afterwards to find your variables and things like that. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and keep talking because there's more tips to come here. Now, keep in mind, we are asked to solve for how many people in the group were children. So you could go through and you could solve for A first and then get to C, but you shouldn't do that. You should go ahead and solve for C first. You want the most direct path to your answer on the SAT math section because it's a timed exam and you want to be efficient. So we're going straight for C. We don't want to get A. We don't need it. So we just don't want to even see it. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to substitute in a value with C for this A value there. The way we do that is by subtracting C from both sides to get 21 minus C is equal to A. Now we go ahead and substitute in. Okay, so it will be 80 times 21 minus C plus 60C is equal to 14. We go ahead and distribute our 80 to our 21 and to our C. 80 times 21 is going to be 1680. And then we are also going to have minus 80C plus 60C is going to equal 14. Now we want to start isolating our C. So minus 80C and plus 60C is going to leave us with negative 20C. Okay, and we're also going to go ahead and subtract 1680 from both sides. Okay, subtract 1680 from both sides. This is going to leave us with 240, or I guess negative 240 is equal to negative 20C. Now from here, we're going to go ahead and divide both sides by negative 20. Negative 240 divided by negative 20 is going to leave you with your answer of C is 12. So our answer there will be answer choice C, because we have 12 children. And as you can see, by solving for the number of children first, we didn't have to go back through and solve for the number of adults. We never have to know the number of adults. If you wanted to go back through and see, obviously you could just put in the number 12 there for C, but it's not necessary. You don't need to know the number of adults, so don't care about it. Don't need to focus on it. Just get the number you need to get to and move on to the next question. Here's how to find x and y intercepts quickly when you have an equation in slope-intercept form. Question 19 states the function h is defined by h of x is equal to 4x plus 28. The graph of y equals h of x in the xy plane has an x-intercept at a and 0 and a y-intercept at 0b, where a and b are constants. What is the value of a plus b? Well, in this case, there's no way to just get to a plus b. Normally, if I see something like that, that's what I'd look to do. In this case, you have to actually find both a and b. So in this case, let's go ahead and start by finding a. We see that a is where our y value is 0. Well, where our y value is 0, we have 4x plus 28 is equal to 0. We subtract 28 from both sides, and we get negative 28 is equal to 4x. We divide both sides by 4. Negative 28 over 4 is going to equal negative 7 as the value of x. Now let's go ahead and solve for our b value. And keep in mind that x there would equal that a value. Okay, so a is negative 7. Now let's go ahead and solve for what b is equal to. Okay, b is where our x value is 0. So we just put in 0 there, and we see that we ultimately are going to get 28. Okay, so we're asked for the value of a plus b. So we just do 28 plus negative 7, which is the same as 28 minus 7. That's going to leave us with 21. So our answer there is A. Here's an example of an SAT math question that's gotten way easier now that the SAT has gone digital. Question 20 states one of the factors of 2x cubed plus 42x squared plus 208x is x plus b, where b is a positive constant. What is the smallest possible value of b? Now keep in mind you need the smallest possible value of b, and that's important here because there's going to be two possible answers. But I want to show you why this question is so much easier now that you have Desmos built into Blue Book on the digital SAT. Before, you would have to factor this out, and that could be a bit difficult, and there's a lot of room for error when you're doing that. But now that you have Desmos in the Blue Book app, when you're taking the digital SAT, you can just put it into Desmos. Now, you have to also understand how to work the problem with Desmos. So in this case, you know that you need the value x plus b. Now, what that means is that you're looking specifically in this case at the negative x values, or the negative x values in regards to the x-intercept, right? So let me go ahead and zoom in here. The reason that we're going to the negative section is because it can't be a positive number, because these are ultimately our zeros. They're not our values for b. Okay, our zeros here, and as you can see, the first negative, or the first 0 there is at negative 8. Okay, now that does not mean negative 8 is our answer, because it's not. Okay, because you have to keep in mind that we're looking for the value of b and x plus b. And x plus b, since it's one of our factors, has to be set equal to 0, which means that x is actually going to equal negative b. Now we know our value for x. Okay, our value for x is negative 8, which means that b has to equal positive 8. Okay, so our answer there will be 8. Now, you really need to make sure that if you are using Desmos, which I do recommend you do take close account to the signs of values, and you understand how to interpret these graphs. Because if you don't understand how to interpret these graphs, but you try to use them, it's not going to help you. So as you saw, when I looked here, I had to understand that I'm looking for the value of b. Okay, to get to that, I need to understand how a factor works, right? The factor has to be set equal to 0. And then once I find this value of x, I have to remember to get that back to b. So make sure that when you do use Desmos on the digital SAT, which I do recommend you do because it helps a ton and makes you faster, less prone to error, that you do at least understand how to interpret these graphs. Here's what you need to know about questions that ask you about the number of real solutions to a quadratic equation on the SAT. I'm going to illustrate this with question 21. Question 21 states in the given system of equations, A is a positive constant. The system has exactly one distinct real solution. What is the value of A? Whenever you have a question asking you about two real solutions, one real solutions, no real solutions, or the number of real solutions, it's basically testing, do you know this crucial rule? And that rule is B squared minus 4AC. Okay. Now this works when you have an equation, a quadratic equation that is set equal to 0. Okay. So a quadratic equation looks like this, and it's got to equal out to 0. Now I'll show you how we get to there in regards to this question in a second, but first I want to explain this rule. So B squared minus 4AC, if this value is greater than 0, then that means that there are going to be two real solutions. Now, what if this value is equal to 0? In that case, there is one real solution. And what if this value is less than 0? Well, if B squared minus 4AC is less than 0, then that means that there are going to be no real solutions. Okay, so 0 real solutions. Okay, I guess I should actually express that as 0 because that's the way it is commonly shown on the SAT, is 0 real solutions. Okay, with this being said, I want to go ahead and go over how we apply this in this question. Okay, so in order to get our B squared minus 4AC value, like I said, we have to set it equal to 0. In this case, it is not set to equal to 0 yet. We have to substitute in this minus 1.5 for y first. So then we would end up with minus 1.5 is equal to x squared plus 8x plus a. Okay, from here, I'm going to go ahead and add 1.5 to each side so that we can get it set equal to 0. So we can use this rule of b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so then we have that much plus a plus 1.5. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick essentially a random variable, which I'm just going to call, we'll use I'm trying to pick one that doesn't sound like or look like a number. Let's use, we're going to use z. Okay, and I'll try to make it very differentiated. Okay, I'm going to let z equal a plus 1.5. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and substitute in z for a plus 1.5, and you'll see why I'm doing this in a moment here. Okay, so now we have our quadratic equation. It's set equal to 0. Now we can do b squared minus 4ac. Now you may be wondering, what's b, what's a, and what's c? Well, I'll go ahead and show you. Okay, our a value is whatever coefficient is in front of this x squared. Since there's no coefficient in front of it, it's 1. Okay, so our a value is 1. Our b value is going to be 8. It's whatever's in front of that x. Okay, and our c value is the constant, which in this case we're representing as z. All right, so b is 8, so that's going to be squared. 8 squared is 64. Okay, so b squared minus 4 times a. Our a value is 1. Okay, so we don't need to show that. Okay, and then times c, which we're representing as z to represent that a plus 1.5. All right, now we know that there has to be exactly one real solution, which means we have to set it equal to 0. Now it's pretty easy to solve. We're going to go ahead and add 4z to each side. So we'll have 4z is equal to 64. We'll divide both sides by 4 to isolate z. So now we have z all alone. We know that z is equal to 64 over 4, which is going to equal 16. Okay, so now z is 16. Well, now that we have z is 16, we can go back up here and we have 16 is equal to a plus 1.5. I'm going to erase this so you can kind of see what I'm doing back up here. 16 is equal to a plus 1.5. I subtract 1.5 from each side, and I get 14.5 is equal to a. Okay, so there's what you need to know about the number of real solutions on the SAT math section, along with this question as an example of how you can apply it. Here's how to quickly answer this SAT math question by understanding zeros. Question 22 states f of x is equal to x plus 6 times x plus 5 times x minus 4. The function f is given. Which table of values represents y is equal to f of x minus 3? Very important thing to hear is to recognize is that f of x is this equation. We have to do that minus 3 there, okay? So what we can actually call this is I'm just going to scratch this out. I'll call it y, and then I'll just add that minus 3 at the end. It's the same thing. All right, so now we have our new equation y. The next thing that we see is that we have to find the table of values that represents it. The key thing that I'm looking for here is I want to find where I have a 0 in parentheses, which we're going to have when x is, sorry, let me write that where you can see it. We're going to have that where x is at -6 because -6 plus 6 is 0. We're going to have that where x is -5 because -5 plus 5 is 0. We'll have that where x is 4, 4 minus 4 is 0. I'm going to look for those x values in my table here. I see all of them are in here, okay? So I know they're all there. Anytime I have one of these, I'm going to have a y value of -3 because 0 times anything is going to end up being 0. So then I just end up with 0 minus 3. Okay, as we can see, a has to then be incorrect. B has to be correct because it has all of these values of our zeros in this x side of the table and it has -3 for all of them. So B is our correct answer. Here's how to quickly solve this SAT math question by understanding the equation for exponential growth. Question 23 states that for the function q, the value of q of x decreases by 45% for every increase in the value of x by 1. If q of 0 is equal to 14, which equation defines q? Well, q of 0 being 14 means that our y-intercept where x is 0 is going to be 14, which means our initial value is 14. So we can get rid of a and b because their initial values are not 14. Next thing we need to recognize is our growth rate, okay, or our growth factor. We have q of x decreasing by 45% for every increase in the value of x by 1. If we're decreasing by 45%, that means our growth factor is 0.55. Okay, we're not getting bigger. Answer choice D would mean that we are increasing. We're decreasing, so that growth factor has to be less than 1. So our answer there is C. Here's a trap to avoid on the SAT math section. Question 24 states the graph of y equals f of x plus 14 is shown. Which equation defines the function f? Many people will pick answer choice C on this question because they'll see the y-intercept is 2 and pick answer choice C, but that's not correct. And the reason why is because you have to pay close attention to the details on the SAT math section. This question states the graph of y equals f of x plus 14 is shown, and we're asked to define the function f, not the function y, not y equals f of x plus 14. So the function f has to be down. It has to have a y-intercept that is 14 below where it is on this graph. So if we go down 14 from 2, we have to be at negative 12, which means our y-intercept has to be negative 12, and our answer has to be answer choice A because that's the only answer choice with negative 12 as the y-intercept. So on the SAT math section, pay very close attention to details with what you're asked to answer with and any equations that you're given, any equations or functions that you're given in the context of the question. Here's how to solve this question about tangents. Here's how to solve this question about similar triangles and tangents on the SAT math section. Question 25 states the side lengths of right triangle RST are given. Triangle RST is similar to triangle UVW, where S corresponds to V and T corresponds to W. What is the value of tan of W? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is, since I have RST as the triangle and they're similar, the tangent values are also going to be the same for the corresponding angle. So I'm going to go ahead and find that W, what is it equal to in RST? Okay, so if I've got V and T correspond, let's see, S corresponds to V. All right, so S corresponds to V. Okay, I see that's the middle one, that's the middle one. And then T corresponds to W. Okay, I see that that's the last one, that's the last one. That means that R will correspond to U. Okay, but we've got tan of W. Okay, so that's going to be T. All right, so we have to find tan of T. Okay, I can just write that as then tan of T. Okay, it's the same thing because these are similar triangles. They're going to have the same tan values for the same angle. All right, so now what is the value of it? Well, let's go ahead and draw out this triangle, okay, because that's just gonna make it easier to visualize. We have a right triangle. We've got RST, so let's go ahead and just mark that, RST. We know T to R is 52. We know S to T is 48. Okay, and keep in mind, this is obviously not drawn to scale. Okay, it's just a quick sketch because we're only really worried about the actual values, not really the angle measures. All right, so now we wanna know the value of tan of W, or tan of T. All right, well, we know that the tan is the opposite over our adjacent. Okay, so our opposite from T would be 20 and our adjacent would be 48. So that's going to equal 20 over 48, which we can simplify down, and we see we have to because they're 20, 48 is not an answer choice. So if we're simplifying this down, we can go ahead and divide them both into 4, and that's going to give us 5 over 12 as our answer. So that'd be answer choice B. Here's how to solve this SAT math question that deals with rearranging variables. Question 26 states 1 gallon of paint will cover 220 square feet of a surface. A room has a total wall area of W square feet, which equation represents the total amount of paint, P, in gallons needed to paint the walls of the room twice. All right. So here's how I ended up with this equation. One quick note, you saw I started writing down variables and sort of the coefficients in front of those variables as I read through. That's a strategy I recommend that you do anytime that you have an SAT math word problem that is 3 lines or longer, okay? Just because it helps you avoid having to reread as much. So just wanted to make note of that. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about how I got there. All right, so we have 1 gallon of paint is going to cover 220 square feet of the surface. Okay, so we have 220 is the amount of square feet 1 gallon P is going to cover. Okay, so this gets us the amount of coverage that we're getting. Now we know that has to equal the area of the wall times 2 because we're going to do it twice, right? We're going to paint the walls twice. Okay, so now we have our equation. Now we see that we need to solve for P. So we just have to find what P equals. Now, all of this question basically hinges on you setting up this equation correctly initially. If you don't set it up correctly initially, you're not going to get to the right answer. So you have to make sure that you understand how the units work, right? Because as you can see here, we are ultimately getting to an area by taking the amount of coverage we get per gallon of paint, multiplying it by the number of gallons. Now we get our area, and we're setting that equal to an area as well. So checking if your units match is a good way to check your work as well. So I wanted to point that out. Okay, we're ultimately getting area equals area. All right, that being said, let's go ahead and solve for P now. We know that P is going to equal W times 2 all over 220 because we divide both sides by 220. Next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and simplify. Okay, we can divide 2 by 2 and 220 by 2. That's ultimately going to give us, if we go ahead and cross both those out, we'll end up with 110 in that denominator. So P is equal to W over 110. Our answer there will be answer choice A. Here's how to solve this difficult SAT math question. Question 27 states the number A is 110% greater than the number B. Well, that means that A is going to equal 2.1 times B because it's 110% greater than the number B. Okay, keep in mind, pay attention to that greater there. That means it's going to be 2.1 times B. All right, the number B is 90% less than 4.7. Well, another way to say that is the number B is 10% of 47. Okay, so that means that B is going to equal 0.1 times 47, which is going to equal 4.7. Now we're asked, what is the value of A? Well, this is pretty easy to solve for now. Okay, in order to get A, we need to know the value of B, which we now know is 4.7. So we just do 2.1 times 4.7. If we put that into our calculator, we will get 9.87 as the value of A. So our answer is 9.87. Here's how to answer statistical inference questions on the SAT. Question 1 states that there are 55 students in Spanish Club. A sample of Spanish Club students was selected at random. That's important whenever you're doing statistical sampling. It must be random sampling in order to provide an accurate statistical inference for you to use later on, and asked whether they intend to enroll in a new study program. Of those surveyed, 20% responded they intend to enroll. Always pay attention to if it's they intend or they not to intend, because sometimes they will put in something that has only 2 options and they will give you one of those being they do or the other being they do not. And you have to pay attention to what you're given. In this case, we're given that they do intend to enroll in the study program. Based on the survey, which of the following is the best estimate of the total number of Spanish Club students who intended to enroll in the study program? In this case, this question's super straightforward. We have 55 total students. We're told that of those who responded, which was a random sample, 20% said they would intend to enroll. We're asked for those who would intend to enroll. So all we have to do is 55 times 0.2, and that'll give us 11. So our answer there would be A. Here's a tip to help you be more efficient on the SAT. Question 2 states Jay walks at a speed of 3 miles per hour and runs at a speed of 5 miles per hour. He walks for W hours and runs for R hours for a combined total of 14 miles. Which equation represents this situation? Okay, well, as you can see, I've already got my answer without having to read through a second time. And the reason why is because I wrote down my variables as I read through. As you can see, it's a little bit messy because my focus is on reading, but I don't have to read through again. And the reason you want to do this is because if you were to read through this word problem without writing anything down, and then you get to the end and it says which equation represents the situation, you now have to go back through. You have to look for your numbers. You have to look for your variables. So what I do when I encounter a word problem on the SAT, and you can usually tell pretty much right off the bat if it's a word problem because it'll be usually at least 3 lines or longer. In this case, it was 4 lines. You want to write down any numbers they give you and any variables they give you as you go through. And you want to try to sort of get it in the equation form that you're expecting. And this comes with a little bit of practice. But as you can see, once I saw we've got walking at 3 miles per hour, right? Running at 5 miles per hour. I'm guessing it's going to be a summation to get us distance. So I went ahead and I put the 3 here, the 5 here. And then once I got my variables, went ahead and attached them to the appropriate number that I got earlier in the question, and then got the equation, not having to read through twice. So this is a great way to save time on the SAT, and I highly recommend doing it. Here's how I recommend approaching questions about scatter plots on the SAT. Question 3 states the scatter plot shows the relationship between 2 variables x and y. A line of best fit is also shown. Which of the following equations best represents the line of best fit shown? What I do in this situation is I take a quick glance at the answer choices to see what format they're in. In this case, I see they're all in slope-intercept form, which is going to make this question really easy. So let's start by finding our intercept. We see our intercept is positive right around 3, which means we can go ahead and get rid of C and D because they both have negative y-intercepts. The next thing I'll take a look at is the slope. In this case, I see my slope is positive. If I look at answer choices A and B, I see only one of them has a positive slope, so my answer has to be answer choice A. Here's how to answer this question that deals with y-intercepts really quickly on the SAT. The question states the graph of y equals f of x is shown in the xy plane. What is the value of f of 0? Well, the value of f of 0 is just the y-intercept. So if we take a look at our graph, we see our answer is going to be 3. So our answer is answer choice D. Here's how to answer questions about adding exponents on the SAT. Question 5 states which expression is equivalent to, and then we have this multiplication question where m, q, and z are positive. What you need to understand in order to answer this question correctly is how to add exponents when you have the same base. So to illustrate this, let's look at m. M to the power of 4 times m is equal to m to the power of 5. Because it's the same base, we add their exponents when we multiply them together. Same thing with q. We have q to the power of 4 times q to the power of 5. That'll give us q to the power of 9. Same thing with z. In this case, we have z to the power of -1 times z to the power of 3. In this case, what we have is z to the power of 2 because it's 3 minus 1, or in other words, 3 plus negative 1. And as we can see, our answer then has to be answer choice B. Here's how to find the median on the SAT. Question 6 states, what is the median of the data shown? We're going to start by getting rid of our minimum value, then our maximum value, then our next minimum value, then our next maximum value, then our next minimum value, then our next maximum value, then our next minimum value, then our next maximum value to find our answer of 79. Now, what if we had two values in the middle and we didn't have an odd number total of values, we had an even number? Well, in that case, let's say, for example, that we had 79 plus 81, or in this case, I guess we'll use 82 since that's the one to the left of it. But it's all arbitrary. We've already answered this question, but I just want to show you what we do in that case. In that case, if we had 79 plus 82, we divide by 2, we take the average, and we use that as the median. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in under 30 seconds. The question states what value of x is the solution to the given equation. Well, we got to isolate x then, so let's go ahead and subtract 40 from both sides. 95 minus 40 is going to leave us with 55 is equal to x. So the value of x that is the solution to the given equation is 55. Here's a tip to be way more efficient on the SAT. Question 8 states the solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of x plus y? What you always want to do on the SAT is look for what you're asked to answer with. In this case, that's the value of x plus y. So does that mean we need to solve for x and y? Not necessarily, and I'll show you why here. If I see I have stacked equations like this, I'm almost always going to look to add or subtract the bottom equation from the top equation, and sometimes that will also mean I need to multiply by some number. But in this case, I don't need to multiply by a number, and what I see immediately is I have 5x and 4x, and I have to get x plus y. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to add these equations together, and that's going to give me x plus y, because 5x plus negative 4x is going to leave me with x, and then I have plus y is going to equal 15 plus negative 2, which is equal to 15 minus 2, which is equal to 13. So our answer there is C, and we don't have to solve for x and y because we were able to get the value of x plus y. Here's an example of how to interpret a word problem on the SAT math section. Question 9 states the given function g models the number of gallons of gasoline that remains from a full gas tank in a car after driving m miles. According to the model, about how many gallons of gasoline are used to drive each mile? Well, we know that g of m is how much gas remains in the tank. Okay, presumably, since before we have driven any miles, this number here is going to end up being 0 since m would be 0. We would start with 12.1 gallons of gas, which means that for every mile m that we drive, we are losing 0.05 gallons of gas. So our answer would have to be answer choice A. Here's an example of how to solve questions that ask you to rearrange variables on the SAT math section. In this case, we're asked the given equation relates the positive numbers b, x, and y. Which equation correctly expresses x in terms of b and y? Well, in order to get our answer, we have to isolate x. Let's go ahead and do that by multiplying both sides by y to start. And then to get 11x to just x, we have to divide both sides by 11. And now we have isolated x. So we have y over 11 times 7b, which, as we can see, 11 times 7 is going to give us 77, and we would have y over 77b. Here's how to solve this SAT math question in two different ways. Question 11 states the graph of the given equations in the xy plane intersect at the point xy. What is a possible value of x? Now, many people would go through and solve this by hand. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I'll talk about the other way you can solve this one. So you have y equals 76 and y equals x squared minus 5. In this case, we can go ahead and plug in 76 for y. So we have 76 is equal to x squared minus 5. The next thing we'll do is we'll isolate that x squared value. So we'll add 5 to each side, and we'll end up with 81 is equal to x squared. From here, you should be able to recognize that your answers are going to be positive and negative 9 for the value of x. But I'll go ahead and show you how we do that. We can take the square root of both sides, which is going to give us plus or minus 9 is equal to x. The reason why it's plus or minus is because x squared, if you put in a negative number, it will still become positive. If you put in a positive number, it will become positive because it's being squared. So our answer there would be B. Now, here's what I want to show you about this question. That's the way I just showed you is one way to do it, and it's perfectly fine. But there is another way to do it. This question is from the digital SAT, which means you'll have access to Desmos while you are taking the SAT. And this is another perfectly valid way to do it. You just put in both equations in Desmos, and you find where they intersect, which in this case we can see here is at negative 9. So both ways are valid. The way I would recommend approaching it is with a question as simple as this. You can do it by hand if you want to, and if you are very confident. For example, if you're someone who's consistently scoring over 1400 on SAT practice tests, in particular over 700 on the math section, and you come across this question and you think it's faster for you to do it by hand, that's fine. You can go ahead and do it. If you're someone who's scoring less than 700 on the SAT math section on practice tests, I'd use Desmos. In my opinion, now that you can use Desmos on the digital SAT, you should be using it fairly often for questions that involve graphing because it helps you avoid human error. So even on a question as simple as this, if someone wanted to use Desmos, I wouldn't fault them at all, and I wouldn't tell them not to. Desmos is a great tool for the digital SAT, and you shouldn't be afraid to use it. Here's how to solve this SAT math question about the solution to a system of inequalities. The question states the point x in 53 is a solution to the system of inequalities in the xy plane. Which of the following could be the value of x? So in this case, we need to solve for x, and we already know that this point is a solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this 53y, and we're going to, which is a y value, and we're going to plug it in for y. So pretty simple on how we're going to set this up. It's going to end up being 4x plus 53 must be less than 18. Okay, now that we've got this set up, let's go ahead and isolate x and solve for it. So we'll subtract 53 from each side. That'll end up leaving us with negative 35 must be greater than 4x. From there, we want to isolate x, as I said, so we divide both sides by 4. Now we see that x must be less than negative 35 over 4. Now what you should be able to recognize here is that 35 over 4, pretty close to 36 over 4, or in other words, 9. Okay, so we know that x has to be less than negative 35 over 4, which means x cannot be negative 5, 5, or 9 because they do not pass that inequality. The only number that does here is answer choice A. Here's how to efficiently answer this SAT math question about percentages, as well as one thing you want to look out for on questions that are simple like this one. Question 13 states that out of 300 seeds that were planted, 80% sprouted. How many of these seeds sprouted? So it's pretty easy to get to our answer. It's going to be 0.8 to represent that 80%. And we're going to multiply it by 300, and that is going to give us our answer of 240. Now, what you want to watch out for on questions that are as simple as this one is whether or not the SAT is going to put something like this. How many of these seeds did not sprout? Okay, and they would probably underline the word not, okay, because that would change the math, right? If you're calculating for the percent or the amount of seeds that didn't sprout, then you would end up with 60. So that is something you want to watch out for on questions on the SAT that are simple like this, is whether or not there's something that could trip you up like that. Here's how to efficiently answer this SAT math question. Question 14 states the function f is defined by f of x equals 4x. For what value of x does f of x equal 8? Well, since we're asked to find the value where f of x equals 8, we go ahead and plug in 8 for f of x, which leaves us with 8 is equal to 4x. From there, we just want to isolate x by dividing both sides by 4. 8 over 4 is equal to 2, which means that the value of x would be 2, and 2 is our answer. Here's how to efficiently answer this SAT math question that deals with division and factors. Question 15 states which expression is equivalent to 8x times x minus 7 minus 3 times x minus 7 all over 2x minus 14, where x is greater than 7. Immediately what I'm seeing is I have x minus 7 here and here. So what I'm going to see is if I have x minus 7 in my denominator, which in this case I see I do because I have 2x minus 14, and I can change that into 2 times x minus 7. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this division problem so you can see what I'm looking for a little bit more neatly. The way we rewrite this is 8x times x minus 7 all over 2 times x minus 7 minus 3 times x minus 7 all over 2 times x minus 7. And now that we've rewritten this, it's very easy to see that these x minus 7s are going to cancel out, which makes this equation very, very simple. Okay, ultimately we have 8x minus 3 all over 2, which once again, we can rewrite this as 8x minus 3 all over 2, which we see as answer choice B. So to answer this question, what you really need to understand is 1, how to factor so you can get that x minus 7 out. And then second, how to sort of change between these similar sort of forms, right, of division, right? You can write 8x minus 3 over 2 like this, and you can also write it like this. So that's really what you need to understand for this question. Here's how to find the slope of equations in standard linear form and use that slope to answer questions very quickly. Question 16 states line P is defined by 2y plus 18x equals 9. Line R is perpendicular to line P in the xy plane. What is the slope of line R? In order to find the slope of line R, we need to first know the slope of line P. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that we have 2y plus 18x equals 9. This is called standard linear form. It's when we have our y and our x on the same side being added together and they're set equal to some constant. Now, because it's in standard linear form, we can use the equation m equals negative a over b, where a is the value or the coefficient in front of x and b is the coefficient in front of y. So in this case, that would be m equals negative a, in this case our a value is 18, so negative 18 over 2, which is going to equal negative 9. Now, in order to get a perpendicular slope to negative 9, you have to do the negative reciprocal. So negative 9 is the same as negative 9 over 1. So to do the negative reciprocal, we have to change the sign from negative to positive, and then we have to flip the fraction to 1 over 9. So 1 over 9 will be our new slope of line R. So we can go slope of R, which means that our answer has to be answer choice C. Here's an example of why you need to know the exponential growth formula for the SAT. Question 17 states the given function f models the number of coupons a company sent to their customers at the end of each year, where t represents the number of years since the end of 1998 and t is between 0 and 5 inclusive. If y is equal to f of t is graphed in the ty plane, which of the following is the best interpretation of the y-intercept of the graph in this context? Your y-intercept when you have an exponential growth formula like this is going to be where t is equal to 0, where the exponent is equal to 0. And when that exponent is equal to 0, 0.65 to the power of 0 is just 1, and you end up with this y-intercept of 8,000. Now, in this case, we know that that is at the end of 1998, since that's our start year. That is where t is 0. So from that, it's very easy to find the answer. So let's go ahead and read through A through D, and let's find the answer. A, the minimum estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers during the 5 years was 1,400, and no. B, the minimum estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers during 5 years was 8,000. No, this is just the value at the beginning of the time. So this is the number of coupons that they sent at the end of 1998. And then C, the estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers was 1,428. No, we know it's 8,000. 8,000 is our initial value. D, the estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers at the end of 1998 was 8,000. Yes, D is our answer. Here's something you need to know about similar triangles for the SAT math section. Question 18 states that triangle XYZ is similar to triangle RST such that X, Y, and Z correspond to R, S, and T respectively. The measure of angle Z is 20 degrees and 2XY is equal to RS. What is the measure of angle T? The answer is C, 20 degrees. Now, how do you know that right away? Well, this piece of information is completely irrelevant and you don't need to know it in order to know the answer is 20 degrees. And here is why. You are told that these are similar triangles. You are also told that Z corresponds to angle T. These two angles correspond to one another, which means that they must have the same angle measure. So this piece of information does not matter. Okay, all you need is that angle Z is 20, angle T must also be 20, and your answer is C. Here's what you need to know about systems of linear equations that have no solution on the SAT. Question 19 states one of the equations in a system of two linear equations is given. The system has no solution. Which equation could be the second equation in the system? First thing we need to know is our slope, which we see is going to be 6. Okay, we see our y-intercept is going to be 18. Now, the reason we need to know these things is because in order for a system of linear equations to have no solution, they need to have the same slope but a different y-intercept. Next thing I notice is answer choices A through D are all in standard linear form, which means that we can use the formula m equals negative a over b, where m is representing the slope. Now, if we do that for answer choice A, we see that answer choice A would be negative 6, which would give us positive 6 over 1, since 1 is the coefficient in front of y. So answer choices A and B, I see, are both going to have a slope of 6. Now, they have the right slope, but which one of them has the correct y-intercept? And by correct y-intercept, it means the y-intercept that is different from the one that we are given, because if they have the same y-intercept, there is infinitely many solutions. And as we can see, answer choice A has y being equal to 6x plus 18 if we were able to convert it to slope-intercept form. And in that case, it's the same equation as is up here. So A is incorrect because that would be the same equation and there are infinitely many solutions to that. Now, B has a different y-intercept. Its y-intercept here is going to be 22. So our answer is going to be answer choice B, has a different y-intercept but the same slope, so there is no solutions possible. Here's how to quickly solve this question about area on the SAT math section. Question 20 states, what is the area in square centimeters of a rectangle with a length of 34 centimeters and a width of 29 centimeters? This question's pretty easy. All you need to know is the area formula for a rectangle, and that's going to be the length times the width. These are both the same unit. They're both centimeters. That's one thing you do want to watch out for on the SAT is if you have different units for one side than the other, then you would have to convert units. In this case, we do not have to do that, and it is very simple. It is just 29 times 34. We are able to use the calculator on the section. This is the digital SAT, so you're going to be able to use your calculator on both of the sections for the math. So you just put it in your calculator, you're going to end up with 986 as your answer. Here's a bunch of tips that I can illustrate with this question to help you ace the SAT. Question 21 states the solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of x minus y? Anytime that you're taking the SAT math section, you always want to pay very, very close attention to what you're asked to answer with. That is the key to moving faster and being as efficient as possible. Know what you want to answer with. In this case, they're asking for the value of x minus y. So what I would do is if I have a system of equations like this, I would look for if there's a way that I can do an addition or subtraction of this bottom equation from the top one in order to get the value of x minus y right away. And sometimes that may involve multiplying one of these equations by some number. Now, in this case, I don't see any way that I can quickly get to x minus y doing this. So it's not applicable here, but we still have the plus minus in order to get the value of x quickly. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. Okay. Like I said, sometimes you're going to have to multiply. In this case, I can see that I have y and 4y. So I'll just multiply this top one by 4 to get rid of my y. So I'll do subtraction here. Okay. So I distribute this 4 to the y. I get 4y minus 4y. Now my y's are gone. Okay, so I'm going to end up with 0 here. And then I'm going to have 4 times 4x of 16x minus 15x will leave me with just x. And then 4 times 1, I'm going to have 4 minus negative 8, which is the same as 4 plus 8. That's going to give me plus 12. So I can see here that if I subtract 12 from both sides, I'm going to end up with x is equal to negative 12. Okay, so now that I've solved for x, I'll go ahead and solve for y. So if x is negative 12, I'll go ahead and erase up here so we can do this quickly. X is negative 12. I'll substitute that in here. So we have negative 12. And the reason I'm choosing this top equation is because we already have y isolated with no coefficients in front of it. So keep in mind that's strategic. Now that since I need y now, I'm not going to pick the y that has a coefficient in front of it. That doesn't make sense to do. We want to just go ahead and get y right away. So we plug in that negative 12, multiply it by 4, we get negative 48. Negative 48 plus 1 is going to equal negative 47. Okay, so now we want the value of x minus y. So that's going to be negative 12 minus negative 47. Okay, so keep in mind, subtracting a negative, it's the same as adding. So we're going to have negative 12 plus 47, and that is going to give us our answer of positive 35. Here's what you need to know about calculating the number of real solutions for quadratic equations on the SAT math section. Question 22 states, how many distinct real solutions does a given equation have? Well, in order to solve this, we're going to use b squared minus 4ac because this is a quadratic equation. Now, if the value of b squared minus 4z is positive, then that means that there are going to be two real solutions. Now, if the value of b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, then that means that there are going to be one real solution. And I should have said there is going to be one real solution. Don't at me in the comments. Okay, and then b squared minus 4ac, if that is less than 0, then that means that you're going to have no real solutions. Okay, now that we've gone ahead and gone over the value of b squared minus 4ac and what that means for the number of real solutions, let's go ahead and calculate it. So your b value is what's in front of the x. Your a value is what's in front of your x squared, and your c value is your constant. Keep in mind it must be set equal to 0 for this to work. So b squared minus 4ac, our b value is 10. 10 squared minus 4 times 5 times 16. What does that equal out to? That is going to equal out to a negative 220. We know is less than 0. Therefore, we must have no real solutions. So our answer is going to be D, 0. There are 0 real solutions. Here's how to convert units on the SAT. Question 23 states a certain park has an area of 11,863,808 square yards. What is the area in square miles of this park? And one thing I want to point out here is anytime you have something underlined on the SAT, it means you need to pay very close attention to it. In this case, it's because we're converting units from square yards to square miles. That being said, we are given what 1 mile is equal to in yards, and that's 1,760. So the key to this question is that you are dealing with square yards, not just yards, square yards, not cubic yards, square yards. That's the key to this whole thing. This makes it super easy as long as you understand that. What you're going to do here is you're going to take your 11,863,808 and you're going to divide it by 1760 squared. And the reason why you have to square that 1760 is because you are dealing in units of square yards to square miles. So you have to square that conversion unit as well. Once you do this, you just put it in your calculator and you're going to end up with 3.83. So your answer there is going to be answer choice B. Here's how to use the circle equation to answer this question on the SAT. Question 24 states, which of the following equations represents a circle in the XY plane that intersects the y-axis at exactly one point? Well, first, I'm going to quickly teach the circle equation to anyone who doesn't know it. So the circle equation we can write as this: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r radius squared, where r is our radius. Okay, now in this situation, we would have a center for the circle of HK. So as you can see, you want to pay attention to the fact that we have those minus signs, but our center is still at H and K. So now that we've gone over that, I'm going to quickly show you how I would approach this. The first thing I would take a look at is what my radius value is for all of these. Now, keep in mind, 16 is the radius squared, which means that the actual radius here, your radius, is actually going to equal 4. Okay, and that's important because we're only intersecting the y-axis at one point. And if you're ever kind of in doubt on a question dealing with sort of circles and graphs, go ahead and draw it out. It's very useful. So I'll go ahead and draw that out to illustrate what I'm looking for here. So if I know my radius is 4, if my x value is anything greater than 4, and I'll put 4 here. For example, I see that my x value for the center, right, is going to be 8 for A and B. There's no way that I can reach that y-intercept, right? No matter where my y is, there's just no way I can get there because my radius is only 4. So I can get rid of A and B already, okay? I have to find somewhere where I'm either at 4 or I'm at negative 4. And the only place that happens, and keep in mind, I'm specifically referring to the x coordinate for your center here. And we see the only place that happens is C. In answer choice D, we see that x's center is at 0. Now, if we had a center at 0, we'd end up with a circle that looks like this, right? And we're crossing that y-intercept twice. So our answer there has to be answer choice C. Here's a term that you need to know for the SAT math section. Question 25 states in triangles ABC and DEF, angles B and E each have measure 27. We see that B and E are here. Okay, so they match up in that triangle. Angles C and F each have a measure of 41. So we see C and F. They also match up in this triangle. Which additional piece of information is sufficient to determine whether triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF? The key thing to understand here and pay attention to is the fact that we are asked about congruency, which means that they are the same triangles. We are not asked about similarity. Two triangles that are similar can have different side lengths, but two triangles that are congruent must have the same side lengths and the same angles. Now, we already know that these triangles are similar because if 2 out of these 3 angles are the same, that means the third angle is the same in them as well. So what we need to know then is if the side lengths are all the same. And the way that we can get that, we can't get that from just one side length because that's only from one of the triangles. Okay, we can't get that from another angle measure. We already know they're all the same. We do need more information because we need to know whether or not these side lengths are the same. And to do that, we need to get these side lengths of 2 corresponding sides, which we get here in BC. Like if we go up here, BC, right here, these last 2 letters and EF. Okay, so our answer there has to be C. And once again, make sure you understand the difference between congruency, which is when triangles are the exact same, and similarity, which is just when they have the same angle measures. This is one of the most difficult SAT math questions, and it has less to do with the actual math involved and more to do with the actual logic that's required to set up the problem. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go over it and let's simplify it down. So question 26 states that 2 data sets of 23 integers each are summarized in the histograms shown. For each of the histograms, the first interval represents the frequency of integers greater than or equal to 10, but less than 20. So the key thing that we need to understand here is that this line right here, right, this 30 number is included inside of here. Right? So it's really going, whatever is sort of inside of a box, keep in mind, it's sort of the 0 through 9. It doesn't include that next 0. Okay. So with that being said, let's keep reading through. The second interval represents the frequency of integers greater than or equal to 20, but less than 30, and so on. What is the smallest possible difference between the mean of data set A and the mean of data set B? So as you can see, pretty much sort of a logical sort of question as for the setup of this, right? So to get the smallest possible difference between these 2 data sets, you want to keep a couple of things in mind. First of all, if you ever have histograms on the SAT, you want to pay attention to the shape of them. Now, if you have 2 of them, like you do in this case, you want to pay attention to the shape of each of them. And as we can see, the shape of them is the same. There's just a shift, right? So the actual shape is the same. As you can see, this one right here goes across into 9, this goes to 7, this goes to 4, this goes to 3. Same thing over here. We have 3, 4, 7, and 9. Right? And we have the same number of bars, obviously. So these are the same shape, but you want to also pay attention to your x-axis as well. And as we can see, data set B is shifted to the left 10 for each of these, right? So now, in order to set up the smallest difference in means, we would actually have to calculate the mean of each, right? But we don't just calculate the mean because we can't, right? It's a histogram. We know that these numbers fall in between these. So the key thing we need to recognize is in order to find the difference, we need to know which one's larger and which one is smaller. Now, this data set A, it has to be larger because all of these are shifted to the right. Okay, so they can't all fall in the same number because, as I pointed out, right, this 30, and this is true for all of these, you know, these rectangles or these bars on the graph, it's not inclusive of, you know, this, for example, right, it's 20 to 29. That doesn't include that 30, right? That 30 is its own. And that's what makes it so there has to be a difference here. Okay, so we already know that the answer can't be 0 because, like I said, there has to be a difference, you know, because we are dealing with the fact that it's 20 to 29, 30 to 39, and so on. So if we are shifting one of them, you know, to the, in this case, to the right, if you're doing from B to A, it would be to the right. If you're doing A to B, it would be to the left. There has to be some difference there. Okay, so with that being said, let's go and calculate that difference. Well, if we're going to calculate what the smallest difference is, we need the minimum value for data set A and we would need the maximum value for data set B because we are subtracting B from A. Okay, so let's start with getting the minimum value of data set A. Okay, so minimum value of data set A. Let me go ahead and go up here. Okay, so minimum value of data set A. What we would do to set this up is we would start by getting the lowest value from our first bar, right? So that's going to be 20. Okay, so we're getting our minimum value of A. So that'd be 20 times 3. Okay, and then we'll have to add on to that 30 times 4. And we'll have to add on to that 40 times 7. And then we'll have to add on to that 50 times 9. Okay, and then once we get that, we're going to have to divide by our total, which is going to be 3 plus 4, which is 7, 7 plus 7, which is 14, and then 14 plus 9, which is 23. Okay, so we're going to take all that, we will divide it by 23. Okay, now keep in mind that we're going to also have that division by 23 over in data set B as well. All right, now we have to calculate our number for data set B, and I'm going to have to scroll down a little bit just so you can see all of this getting written out. So go ahead and try to scroll down. Okay. So we're gonna have to set up a pretty similar thing, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and put in our subtraction sign, and I know it's not super great formatted, but that's okay. All right, so we're gonna have minus now. We have to do kind of the opposite thing that we just did in A. So in this case, we're taking our maximum values. Now, keep in mind that our maximum values are not inclusive, right? So this is a range of 10 to 19. Okay, so we have to take 19 there. So that'd be minus 19 times 3, plus 29 times 4, plus 39 times 7, plus 49 times 9. Okay, and this is all also over 23. Okay. And then when we put this into our calculator, which is what you'd do. Okay. I wrote this out. You would just be typing this in your calculator. Okay. This is ultimately going to get you your answer of 1. So your answer there is going to be B, and that's how you solve this tricky SAT math problem. Here's something you need to know for the SAT, and that's how to extract numbers from underneath the square root. Question 27 states a triangle has legs with lengths of 24 centimeters and 21 centimeters. If the length of the triangle's hypotenuse in centimeters can be written in the form 3 times the square root of D, where D is an integer, what is the value of D? Well, in order to get in this form of 3 times root D, we need to first actually know what the hypotenuse's length is. So let's go ahead and solve for that. So we have a right triangle. We know we have lengths of 24 and 21 as our side lengths. We need to solve for hypotenuse, which we're going to represent as c squared, and we're going to use Pythagorean theorem. So we're going to go ahead and do 24 squared plus 21 squared. That's going to equal c squared. Okay, we know that this is going to equal, let's put it in our calculator, and we're going to get 1017. Okay, so we'll take the square root of each side to isolate c. Okay, so we know that c is going to equal that square root of 1017. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and write this out a little bit more neatly. We know c is equal to root of 1017. C is our hypotenuse. So that's what we're trying to solve for. Now, we need to ultimately rewrite this in a form where 3 is extracted. Okay, well, underneath the square root, in order to extract the value of 3, we would have to have the value of 9 underneath that square root. And the way we get that's just pretty simple, right? It's by 3 squared. Okay, since we have a square root here, we'd be squaring 3 and we would get 9. All right, so now what we have to do is we have to do 1017 divided by 9, and that's going to give us 113. And now what we do is we set this equal to 9 times 113, which as you can see is still going to equal 1017, since we had 1017 over 9 equal 113. So because of that, we now have 9 underneath the square root, which means that we can extract 3 because, and I'll just write this over here, okay, because the root 9 times 113 is the same as root 9 times root 113. And what is root 9 equal to? Well, root 9 is equal to 3. Okay, so now we've extracted that 3, and we see we have 3 root 113, which is the same format as we got in this question. So we know the value of D has to be 113 as well. So our answer is 113. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and consider sending a super thanks to help support my channel. Additionally, please drop a comment below letting me know what videos you want me to make in the future. And if you are looking for additional educational services that I offer, please check out my website, haydenrhodea.com.